It started like any other flight. A successful businessman boards a plane, heading home after a long week of meetings. He takes his seat in first class, quiet, respectful, just trying to relax before takeoff. But within minutes, everything changes. Flight attendants whisper, security shows up, and without warning or clear explanation, he's told to get off the plane. Passengers watch in shock. Phones come out. Some record, some stay silent. He asks why. No answer. Just a cold order to leave. The man happens to be black, and despite showing no signs of trouble, he's treated like a threat. He doesn't argue. He doesn't cause a scene. He just walks off, calm but shaken. What the airline didn't know: that man wasn't just any passenger. He's a major investor with deep influence in the business world. And as soon as he steps off the jet bridge, he makes a single call. One call that would cost the airline more than they could imagine: $5 billion in pooled funding. This story isn't just about one man or one flight. It's about how small actions can carry massive consequences. About respect, assumptions, and power. And as the airline scrambles to do damage control, the real question becomes, what happens next? Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning. The man's name: Marcus J. Reed. Quiet in public, but powerful behind closed doors. CEO of a major investment firm with ties to some of the biggest names in aviation, energy, and tech. Most people on that flight had no idea who he was. To them, he was just another passenger. But to the airline, once they realized who they had just kicked off their plane, panic started to set in. Marcus wasn't dressed flashy. No entourage, no loud demands. Just a man traveling alone, like anyone else. But when he made that call, it wasn't out of anger, it was out of principle. Because this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Not to him, not to people who looked like him. The difference? This time, the man they underestimated had the power to shake the foundation of a billion-dollar corporation. Back at headquarters, phones started ringing. Emails were flagged urgent. Board members wanted answers, and fast, because when $5 billion in funding is suddenly pulled, investors notice. Stocks respond, headlines follow. But Marcus wasn't speaking to the media. He wasn't giving interviews. The silence made it worse, for the airline at least. People wanted to know what happened, why he was removed, who made the call, but no one had answers, not yet. And Marcus, he was just getting started. Inside the airline's executive offices, the mood shifted from confident to chaotic. Senior leaders were scrambling, trying to piece together exactly what had happened on that flight. The official report from the flight crew mentioned a security concern, but gave no details. And when someone quietly pointed out Marcus J. Reed's name, jaws dropped. Within hours, news had started leaking. Not about what happened, but about what it had caused. A mysterious investor pulling out billions. A major deal falling through. Shareholders panicking. The stock dipping. Meanwhile, Marcus stayed quiet. He wasn't looking for public sympathy. He'd been in boardrooms where he was the only black man at the table. He knew what quiet bias looked like. He'd seen it play out in deals, in meetings, and now minus 35,000 feet in the air. But he wasn't the only one paying attention. Social media was starting to buzz. Passengers who had been on the flight posted vague clips, blurred video, confused commentary. One post read, "This man did nothing. They just pulled him off." Another said, "He looked calm. Everyone else looked nervous." The story wasn't viral yet, but it was simmering. At the same time, internal emails at the airline were being leaked. Words like miscommunication, review protocols, and contained damage kept coming up. But no one could answer the one question hanging over everything. Why was he really removed? And who gave that order? The pressure inside the airline was boiling. Executives were now holding emergency meetings around the clock, and the legal team was digging through passenger reports, security footage, anything they could use to justify the decision. But there was a problem. They couldn't find a clear reason. No threats, no disruptions, nothing unusual. Just a man sitting quietly in first class, And that man happened to be tied to one of their largest investors. Marcus still hadn't spoken publicly, but behind the scenes, his network was moving fast. Quiet calls to major partners, meetings with board members at other companies. People listened when Marcus spoke, especially when he didn't need to raise his voice. And the message spreading through those calls was simple: actions have consequences. News outlets had started sniffing around. Journalists were piecing together timelines. Former employees were sharing stories. Patterns were emerging. Other passengers, black, brown, even staff, started coming forward with their own quiet experiences. Subtle moments, tense glances, little things that added up. And suddenly, this wasn't just about Marcus anymore. Then came the moment that turned up the heat. A leaked memo. Internal, marked confidential. In it, a senior airline official questioned if the optics of his presence might upset certain travelers. The internet exploded. Now it wasn't just a business story, it was a firestorm. And Marcus? He hadn't even said a word. Not yet. Just when the airline thought it couldn't get worse, the second blow hit, and it came from within. A whistleblower, someone deep in the airline's corporate structure, sent an anonymous tip to a major news outlet. Attached were internal chat logs between senior operations staff, discussing Marcus by name * before * he even boarded the flight. The messages were casual, but coded. One line read, "Keep an eye on the guy in 2A, could be a problem." Another, "Don't want another PR mess like last month." No official reason, no protocol triggered, just an assumption, based on nothing more than presence. The leak hit headlines overnight. Executive targeted before takeoff. Read one title. Was it racial profiling? Leaked chats suggest so, said another. Now, public pressure wasn't just building, it was roaring. Activists called for boycotts. Civil rights attorneys started circling. Celebrities began reposting the story, demanding accountability. And through all of this, Marcus still hadn't spoken. But behind the scenes, he was moving pieces like a chess grandmaster. The $5 billion funding pull, that was just the start. He was now in quiet talks with two rival airlines, offering investment, partnerships, even tech upgrades his firm had been developing. If the deal went through, it would shift the balance of power in the aviation world. And still, the original airline had no idea what his next move would be. The storm finally reached its peak when Marcus broke his silence. In a quiet press conference, no flashing lights, no shouting reporters, he stepped up to the mic and told the story from his side. Calm, direct, and measured, he laid out what happened on that flight, what he'd experienced, and what it meant in the bigger picture. He didn't rant, he didn't accuse. He just told the truth, and sometimes that's louder than anything else. But then came the twist no one saw coming. Marcus revealed that he had been in talks with the airline months before the incident, not just as an investor, but as a potential partner in a new diversity and equity initiative they were quietly developing to clean up their internal culture. He had been reviewing the hiring practices, training programs, and policies around bias. He was the one pushing for real change. And yet, despite knowing exactly who he was, someone in that chain still saw him as a risk. That wasn't just poor judgment, it was betrayal. With cameras rolling, Marcus announced he had finalized a multi-billion-dollar deal with a competing airline, one that welcomed his leadership and committed to his vision. Overnight, market shares shifted, stock price. But then came the twist no one saw coming. Marcus revealed that he had been in talks with the airline months before the incident, not just as an investor, but as a potential partner in a new diversity and equity initiative they were quietly developing to clean up their internal culture. He had been reviewing their hiring practices, training programs, and policies around bias. He was the one pushing for real change. And yet, despite knowing exactly who he was, someone in that chain still saw him as a risk. That wasn't just poor judgment, it was betrayal. With cameras rolling, Marcus announced he had finalized a multi-billion-dollar deal with a competing airline, one that welcomed his leadership and committed to his vision. Overnight, market shares shifted, stock prices flipped, and the airline that once quietly removed him from his seat now found itself publicly fighting to survive. Full circle.